continue with the autobiography. This second tape, I will devote the first part of it, at least, to the war years. As you know, the Second World War started in 41, December 7th. I was at that time working for the Western Electric Company in Kearney, New Jersey. And the Western Electric said, we want him, we can't go without him. We have to have him. We want to get a deferment for him. So they did get a deferment for me for 6 months. Went by. But the draft board said, at the end of 6 months, we'll see how the situation is, and you will probably go. And at the end of the 6 months, they said, yes, you are going to go in the June group, so get yourself geared up here by June 7th, or you'll be in the Army. Okay? So realizing that whatever branch of service had me, they would keep me rather than send me off to someplace else, because each branch of service wanted as many men as possible, and they were desperately trying to get them, not give them away. So I went to Fort Monmouth, which is a Signal Corps post, and I enlisted there. And that was okay. That was on May 11, 1942. After a week of laying around, keeping out of sight of the first sergeant and the duty sergeant, as I was instructed by my LR mates, they finally started to have the basic training. Now, basic training consisted of falling out in the field and sitting in the bleachers while Sergeant Guttenberg described various things about the Army to us. Then he would get us out in the front of him, and there were about 30 or 40 of us, I guess, is all. And we would, maybe it wasn't even that many, and he would have us stand out there and teach us how to stand up, how to turn left and right, how to step off on your left foot, and a few other maneuvers like to the rear march and get your hands out of your pockets and things like that. One day he brought out a gun, a rifle, and he held it up, and he said, his words were, this is a 1903 Springfield rifle. Does everybody see it? All right, wake that man up over there. Do you see it, soldier? Yes, it's a gun. All right, now, you've seen it. All right, now, if you ever see it again, you'll know what it is, right? Okay, bear that in mind. And he set the gun down. And that was all there ever was on arms and ammunition training for me in the Army. After 3 weeks of basic training, they figured that we were all soldiers now. So they assigned us to companies and places where we would go to school. And I would start to go to school in the morning. We'd get up early, 6 o'clock, get our breakfast eaten, get in line, march over to the school, go to school for till noontime with a 10-minute break every hour. Then we would come back to our company and have our lunch. After lunch, we would fall out in the yard for some other maneuvers, and march us back and forth and teach us how to be soldiers. Well, some of us learned a little bit, and some of us never learned anything. Come Saturday, we had to fall out for a parade at 1 o'clock, but as soon as the parade was over, we were free to go for the weekend. And what we would do then, we'd get our pass, jump on the train, or hitchhike up to New York City and go to the USO. We could go and get tickets for the shows, do all kinds of neat things. If anything else in New York was worth doing was on the list, we could go and do it. It didn't cost us anything. Or it might cost 15 cents or some ridiculous low figure. Then after we had done that, when it was time to go back home, we get on the train and ride back down to Red Bank on the train. And if we cost, because we were soldiers, it was cost us 50 cents to ride the train for that distance of about 40 miles. Actually, I think at that time, if it was servicemen in uniform could ride the public transportation for 50 cents, no matter how far it happened to be. The general rule at Fort Monmouth was that on the weekend, 75% of us could be gone if we had a pass. 25% had to remain on the post for emergency uses, in case there was a fire, and there was a case, who knows what it might have been. 75% could leave on the weekend. and I used to leave every chance I could get. I was either going to New York or I was going home for the weekend. We only lived 30 miles away. While we were at Fort Monmouth, we were in the 15th Signal Service Regiment. Later we were in the 14th Signal Service Regiment, parentheses provisional. The 15th and the 14th both existed, and I think that what they were doing was trying to make the 14 make it into two regiments so that the officer staff then could enjoy more officers and more positions. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's a supposition. Or surmisation, I guess is what you really should say about it. Everyone going to school there was not formal classes. We did have classes, but everyone was working at his own pace. And therefore, some transplants started on different days and went and proceeded at different rates. So that some fellows who may have come in to the school after you may have finished before you, depending on how, or vice versa. What we did, we would know until we finished the course, and then we'd have a test. The test usually consisted of fix that radio over there, and they would have put a lot of faults in it, broken some wires, or misplaced a tube, or substituted bad tubes, or did something, so that you had to think a little bit to get the radio to work. At the end of the regular radio repair course, a lot of the fellows disappeared. They were sent off to who knows where. We don't know, but they were off to someplace else in the Army to do some radio fixing. Now, some of us stayed behind and went on to the next course, which was radio repair VHF. VHF was very high frequency, and it was new at that time. No one had ever used these frequencies before. They're quite common now with our television and the TV and the FM. You work in these same frequency ranges, but at that time they were not used except here by the military. Just started to use it during the war. So it was a brand new, state-of-the-art, whatever it was, thing. And it was a special course one had to take in order to learn how to do it a little differently than the regular lower frequencies. Simultaneously, some of the fellows were finished the school and were sent over to the radar school. There was another school which was in behind a big high fence, and nobody knew what was in there but a radar, whatever that is. And that was pretty brand new then too, but somebody had to know how to work it. So I didn't learn about radar until later on, but at the time at Fort Monmouth, when it was existent and taught there, I had no idea what radar was. Eisenhower's invasion of North Africa occurred in November of '42, and then immediately thereafter it was decided that we need more of you guys, VHF repairmen in North Africa. So off we went in a big cloud of dust. They formed up a group of 56 sergeants, and they put us on 4 different boats, with 14-man crew on each boat, and over we went to North Africa. And we arrived there in the middle of January, 12 days after having left. Well, no, it was 21 days after having left New York. Well, at any rate, we did arrive in Oran, and all of us arrived. We later learned that they didn't expect us all to. That's why they sent 4 crews. It wasn't quadruplicate, it was quadruplicate. As long as at least one of us arrived, they would have been happy. But all 4 were there. Then we learned that on the initial invasion, they lost a couple of ships, and they lost all the equipment that we were to use. So we were there, and there was no equipment. So we had nothing to do but wait until the next shipper, their 2 convoy came and brought the equipment, which was taken directly out of the school. There wasn't anything, no such thing as you buy some more, because they hadn't made it yet. So they took all the equipment out of the school in Fort Monmouth and sent it to us here in Africa. We still had our initials carved in their tables. And so I became a part of one of the 4 VHF installation crews. I was part of the second crew. The crew consisted of 6 tech sergeants, that's 5 stripes, 3 staff sergeants, 4 stripes, and 5 3-stripe sergeants. Now everybody was a specialist in some way. The tech sergeants, the 6 of us, were specialists in the entire system, VHF system of tracking airplanes, and also the repair and maintenance of the equipment. The 3 staff sergeants, or T4s as they were called, they had the job of taking care of the telephone lines. One of them used to work for Southern Bell, and the other 2 were recruited into the works and taught how to splice the cables and hook up the telephones. The 5 other guys were general service and general utility men. Their job was to get the power stations going, fire up the thing, call the gasoline, do the damn thing, make it work, do whatever everyone else told them to do. We needed an extra hand. We called one of them to come and get this stuff here and let's go with it. We had one guy who was a specialist, Louis J. Sanchez. We put him to work because he was good at finding things before people lost them. And as soon as we discovered that, we put him in charge of all of our things and make sure that nobody found any of ours before we lost them. That was a no-no. So that was his primary job, is to protect our equipment and our things. And he understood. He understood that we would not take any crap from him. If he screwed up, he was in trouble. And so he did behave himself pretty much. Our equipment consisted of transmitters, receivers, fixer stations, homing stations, and each of these pieces of equipment, major pieces, were mounted in trucks, in 2.5-ton trucks, so that we had only to really drive the truck to the site and put up the antenna poles and connect things and turn it on, and it was supposed to work. And usually it did. We had power generators that we towed behind the truck, power generators to supply the power, 110 volts. So we always had plenty of power to do other things with too, because the power units were oversized for what the requirement was. We usually would use 2 power units for each station so that we always had a backup, and we could always fire up one when it ran out of gas. We could fire up the second one and switch over without having to stop and fill it up and have dead time off the air. We could just have a minimum of time off the air. It wouldn't really do. We didn't want it to happen that when the controller was talking to the airplane that the power had failed. That would not be a good thing to have happen. All 4 crews arrived in Oran at the same time when we got over there in Algeria. And then we were dispersed, 2 of them up towards Tunisia, one that stayed in Algeria, and our crew was sent down to Morocco, down at Casablanca, where we stayed for a couple months. And then we left there. We flew up. What we did in Casablanca was establish a school to teach the 15th Fighter Control Squadron people how to run the Fighter Control Squadron. They were just there, and they didn't know what they were doing. So we had to teach them how the whole system worked. And we also had to teach some of the pilots how to pay attention to what they're saying on the radio. So we had a school for ground controllers talking to the pilots flying around the air, and the person would make the equipment work and on the ground making it work. And we 6 of us from the crew teaching them how to do it. Anyway, that was our job in Casablanca. Then in May we moved up to Tunisia, stopping off in Algiers on the way. On our way to Tunisia, we stopped in Algiers and were attached for a period of time to the 17th Signal Company for rations and quarters. The reason for that being that they were looking for somebody of our status to to install equipment on board the Ancon to use for the invasion ship, which the Ancon later did become the #1 invasion ship control for the invasion of Normandy. And we would have installed the equipment had we stayed there and done it. But our own Captain Reddy came through, put in a big appeal for us to go with him on up to Tunisia because his fighter control squadron needed us because they were not fully trained to operate as they should have operated. And that was a more immediate thing than whenever the invasion was going to occur. At any rate, we dropped the outfitting of the Ancon and went on to Tunisia, arriving up there towards the latter part of May. We were flying all this time. All my transportation overseas was all in the airplane, C-47. We flew down to Casablanca, back to Algiers, Algiers to Tunisia, Tunisia to Sicily, Sicily to Italy, Italy up to Northern Italy, Northern Italy back to Rome. But that was all C-47 travel, but that comes later. Well, anyway, we're down there now. We're at a place I believe was at Berashid, which quickly became corrupted into Bera, you know what. Well, anyway, we're about 150 miles south of Tunis, near Sousse and Sfax, where we used to run over and go swimming occasionally. It was so damn hot. The hottest I ever was in my life. The weather station estimated our temperature would reach somewhere between 125 and 130 in the afternoons, and it never went under 100 for the last 2 weeks we were there before the invasion in July. It was July 10th the invasion happened. We were still sitting there. We were going to go out and play a ball game, but it was hot, so we waited till it got almost dark, and the fellows went out to play ball. Well, then we saw the planes taking off, C-47s towing gliders out of the field, and we knew, uh-oh, they're going now. This has got to be it. So we went over to one of our vans and turned on and listened to the radio and hear what the guys were saying. Poor guys, they got over to Sicily. When they got there, the Navy had instructions to shoot anything in the air. So they got shot up, shot down, and one thing and another. Lost a lot of men. Friendly fire. You never hear much about it in the news. You didn't hear anything. You don't hear much about it anymore, but it was a big disaster. I remember one guy calling on the radio. He wanted instructions how to drive the airplane, because he was in the C-47, and he realized that he was the only one alive in the airplane, and he wanted to come home. So he figured out how to make it go, turn this way and that, but he didn't have any idea how to land it or which way to go to get home. So he was asking and begging, please tell me what to do. Well, in a little bit somebody got on the air and told him, and he got a pilot to come sit with him and instruct him as to what levers to push and how to land the plane. So he did indeed bring it back. But that was a pretty good feat. 2 or 3 days later, I don't remember exactly, the infantry had moved through Palermo, and we flew over and landed there, where we waited for the rest of the squadron to arrive by truck. They had to come down on LCT and get into the harbor and get in that way, which wasn't too easy. But on their way, Patton saw one of our guys without his hat on, or he had the wrong hat on, and he gave him hell from another ship and made him throw his hat overboard. But anyway, that was George Patton for you. He wanted it his way, and that was it. I never saw him myself personally, but he did throw him, the guys from the 15th Fighter Control Squadron. He gave them a fit when they were landing in Sicily. When the rest of the gang showed up with the equipment, when we all got there to Palermo, we had to spend our time waiting. We had a couple of pretty good air raids on the port. It's scared the living doodads out of you. But we survived that. He was one of the times I was really scared, but we got over it. Then when our stuff showed up, we drove down to the far western tip end of Sicily to Trapani, We were part of the Strategic Air Force. Our problem was to get the message through, get the equipment delivered, bring it around through the Mediterranean, and deliver it so that the other guy, the tactical guys, could use it and fight the war. We no more got to Trapani. We got our equipment set up on top of the old volcano when we heard some guy hollering Mayday. So we answered him, told him to come to me, and told him which way to go. And lo and behold, it was a B-17. He was all shot up. He was on his way home, trying to get home. They were throwing everything overboard. The men were okay, but all they had to do, they were trying to make the ship lighter by throwing everything they could get loose. They threw it out. And they had, when they finally did make it, they came in. They were about to throw the radio away when somebody remembered to push a button and call Mayday, which they did, and we answered them. So they were lucky. Anyway, they stayed around 2 or 3 days. No, actually, they stayed longer than that, because they had to get new engines put in the plane. 2 new engines, plus a few other pieces and parts. When they finally got us back together, they would run down to Palermo and get our mail for us. Imagine getting your mail delivered by a B-17. Those guys were out of their dumb minds, the way they flew that plane. When finally they left, went back to Africa, another couple hundred miles. When they got back to Africa, we heard that they flew down the company street and blew down all the tents. So they grounded the pilot, which is exactly what he wanted. He'd had enough of this damn airplane driving. He'd already been on 50 missions, and he thought it was time that he just took it off on himself to take it easy. Forget this driving up there every day. After Sicily, which I could give you more detail, but I won't, we went over to Italy. We didn't go on the invasion in Salerno, but we went shortly thereafter, as soon as the boys had pulled up and taken Naples. We went in and landed in Rosignano Airport. Or it was Rosignano in Rome. Oh well, whatever the airport is there at Naples. It was the airport where they made the Alfa Romeo airplanes earlier, or some of them. Anyway, we landed there, and this was in, now we're up to October. From June or July in Sicily, now we're in October, late September or October in Naples. And again, we have to wait for the equipment to show up. This time the fellows drove it down to Messina, across the Strait of Messina in a ferry, and then up the boot, having a lot of trouble up the hills as they went. So we were obliged to wait quite a long spell for them to show up so we could get to work and do anything at all. We, however, did take transmitters and receivers and antenna poles over with us, because we wanted to establish a station that we could at least communicate with the airplanes. Whether we could tell where they were or not, we didn't know, but we could at least talk to them. Up to this point, the airplanes, fighter aircraft, had been a few P-40s, P-39s, P-38s, and Spitfires. And that's about it, about the size of the Air Force that we had in Africa at that time. Well, of course, the 12th Air Force had their bombers. They had some heavy bombers, the 17s and 24s, and they also had some light bombers, 26s and the like, and 25s. So they were supplied with them, but as far as the fighter aircraft were concerned, were just those that I have already mentioned. 4 of us, not having much else to do at the moment, Claimer, Cumming, Dillon, and Asness, I don't know where the other 2 guys were, but we bugged out and we took off with AWOL, went out to the Isle of Capri, and we stayed out there for 2 or 3, 4 days. Had a whale of a good time, enjoyed it very much, ate good, the Italians loved us. We went to the Blue Grotto, we did all the tourist things, and it was a wonderful thing to do. And now my telephone's ringing. We stayed in Naples, and afterwards for about 8 months, all the way up till May, when after the invasion at Anzio, that is. First crew went to Anzio, we stayed back. They seemed to have hit every invasion. They got it, but we moved in soon enough. We got credit for it. So as soon as they took Anzio, moved on to Rome, we moved on to Rome and beyond. From that point on, the first crew and we did more leapfrogging. We'd see them more often. But they would leapfrog ahead of us, and then we would leapfrog ahead of them. And then they would leapfrog ahead of us. The whole fighter control squadrons would jump over each other as we went along, with one operating and one moving all the time. We continued that until the war ended, and we were in Verona. We went up through the west coast, through Grosseto, Verona, Leghorn, Pisa, Florence, Parma, over the hill, over the Po River, and ended up in Verona when the war ended. And they called it all up and said we could go home. And this was now in May of 1945. The war is over. We can go. Well, the war is officially over, but we're still here. And we can't go because there's no transportation to take us home. So we have to wait. Even though we got all the credits in the world for getting out early, we still were not able to because we were still in Italy. And the other guys, the Low Point men, who didn't quite make it, they got out early. They got rid of them. They had all the discharges and the celebrations. What we did was just sat on our butts and waited and drank beer while we waited for a ship to bring us home, which then took another 28 days. So I got home it was discharged in the 13th of October of 1945. I finally made it home. Oh well, that's la vie, that's the way it worked. We'll get into another chapter here in a second or two. What I want to do here is see how this thing plays out now. It's running. But what I want to do is to take all this tape off this thing and put it on the new one. I want to see if this will indeed jump over and continue to play in the opposite direction, which I think is what it's supposed to do. It's running now, but I have to wait to see what it's going to go. And I'm talking to it, and it's just sitting there, and all of a sudden it's going to come to the end of the tape, which I hope it's going to be pretty soon, so that I can see what happens. Then I can start the next chapter on the other side. Or did I do that already? I don't know, maybe I am on the other side. Haha, I better stop and check. No, I won't either. I'll just let it go like it is. We'll see what happens here. Okay? Yeah. We'll have a little red light on here.